Welcome to AAU Teen Talk TV. You're watching Conversations with Verdel Jones, and I'm your host, Verdel Jones. This show is about engaging you and informing you about relevant topics, educating you on things that matter. Today we're going to talk about the school to prison pipeline, but we're going to talk about some solutions and some strategies and interventions for our youth and how to prevent it, or once they might be caught up in the school to prison pipeline, how to help them out. So we have two great guests with us this afternoon to discuss these topics. And remember, in the words of Maya Angelou, when you learn, teach, and when you get, give. Welcome to Conversations with Verdel Jones. Welcome to Conversations with Verdel Jones. Before we get started with our conversation and we invite our two guests on, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Mr. and Mrs. Roger and Shavonna Johnson. They are the founders and CEO and CFO of the Whitney E. Johnson Foundation. They're also the executive producers of AAU Teen Talk TV and AAU Teen Talk Radio. And they're also the founders of AAU Youth Magazine. And AAU stands for All About Us, and that's what it's about here on AAU Teen Talk. So for more information, you can go to our website. It's aaum.com, and be sure to order your youth magazine, your AAU Youth Magazine today. So we're going to, as I said, talk about the school to prison pipeline, but we're going to talk a little bit about the initiatives and solutions, to help our youth. We had a part one to this show when we talked about what the school to prison pipeline actually is. So before we invite our guests and before we start our discussion, I'd like to show a short video clip just so everybody kind of gets an idea of what the school to prison pipeline is all about. So we're going to show that clip.
The school to prison pipeline. It's a term that describes how American kids get pushed out of public schools and into the juvenile and criminal justice systems. Basically, harsh zero-tolerance policies in schools have led to more suspensions, expulsions, and even in-school arrests. Getting suspended or expelled means more time away from school, and it doesn't take an honor student to figure out that's bad news. In fact, expelled and suspended students are more likely to get held back a grade, end up in juvie, or just drop out altogether. And dropping out of high school makes you 3 times more likely to get arrested. Back in school, forget about hallway monitors. Students these days often have to deal with school police. Minor offenses that might have landed you in the principal's office back in the day can now actually lead to your arrest. Students of color and those with disabilities are proportionately affected. Black students get expelled 3 times more than their white classmates, while a student with a disability is 2 times more likely to get an out-of-school suspension than everyone else. And it's not because these kids are just bad apples. The Justice Department found that black students got harsher punishments than their white peers for doing the same things. So maybe it's time our education system got schooled?
Okay, that clip just kind of really breaks down what the school to prison pipeline is. And it also talks about how our black students are disproportionately affected from this phenomenon. So, like I said, we have two great guests here with us this afternoon. So first, I'd like to introduce Dana Boylan. Dana Boylan has worked as an assistant district attorney for Nassau County. She's currently the director of community youth development programming and really working to address some of those issues concerning our youth. We also have Corey Pegues. Corey Pegues is a 20-year veteran of the New York City Police Department. He's retired. He's a retired executive. He kind of rose through the ranks of the department and retired as an executive within that department. He's also a new author, and his book, Once a Cop, will be released in May 2016, but you can pre-order that book on Amazon.com. So we're excited to have that book come out. And Corey also hosts a show on AAU Teen Talk TV as well, Corey Pegues Live. So you got to look out for that as well. So we're going to dive right into the conversation because it's a lot of information to cover. So Dana, I'm going to start with you a little bit about some initiatives and programs that your office kind of spearheads to work with our youth.
I think when we think about initiatives and solutions, we have to realize that suspension, expulsion, and arrest for minor offenses do not solve the problem. When that occurs, kids are put back into environments that are probably dysfunctional and unhealthy to begin with, which may be the reason why they're misbehaving.
Right.
And the academic environment is oftentimes a stable environment, or should be
one of the
their
most
life.
for a lot of these students, right?
Exactly. So when we talk about initiatives in our office, as we mentioned in the previous segment, we have our youth court initiative, and that's really about intervention, which is different from prevention.
Right.
It's really about intervention and potentially prevention, because it prevents, hopefully, future acts.
So the intervention this is something that happens after a student has
gone into the pipeline.
Absolutely.
Okay. So our youth court is assuming that you have been arrested. Obviously, there has been an arrest, whether it's something from an incident at school or an incident in the community. There's been an arrest of a youth, and our youth court works through the process of resolving that case, getting them out of the system as quickly as possible, because we recognize that keeping them in the system keeps them in the pipeline, and potentially it becomes a cycle, a recurring cycle,
something
and so
that
forth.
they can't get out of at a certain point.
Some of the other things that we're working on is on the prevention side. So through our initiative called CODA, Council for Thought and Action, we actually mentor kids. So we go into school districts that invite us in and allow us in, and we use relevant individuals, and I'll explain that in a minute, to mentor the students that are identified by the district as kids that could use the support. We also do gang outreach. Those students or youth who are being courted by gangs, joining a gang, in gangs, we try to reach them, and that's on the prevention side. So mentoring obviously is a preventative tool. Our gang outreach could be both, either prevention or intervention, and it's absolutely needed. When I talk about using relevant individuals or credible messengers, these are people who themselves have been involved in the system. They went through, more likely, the school to prison pipeline, certainly the prison pipeline. They've exited it and have done well, are successful in returning to the community as positive individuals who have turned their lives around, and they're reaching back to connect with youth who need those connections. And that's important. Not everyone can reach a child who's in trouble, who's acting out, but certainly someone that can relate to the behavior, relate to the experience, relate to all the factors that would lead to those behaviors, is why we try to use certain individuals to connect with them.
What was the term you used?
Credible messengers.
Credible messengers.
Yes. Yes. So not everyone can bring you a message, right? It has to be someone that you feel, I can receive this message from you. You understand me. You understand my concerns, my circumstances, and I'm going to stop and listen. So when you have a person, for instance, who's been to prison for 21 years, from the time he was 14, and that's a real story. Okay, and he then goes back to the school environment after going through his development, his education, getting back to the work environment, self-developed, and he goes back to school and says, listen, 14-year-old young
Right.
man, I used to be you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what occurred to me.
Right.
And I spent 21 years as a result of that behind bars. I'm a credible messenger.
Right.
I can deliver a message to you about what you should be doing, what is available to you, why you should be doing something different, and so forth.
Right. Corey, I want to bring you into this conversation. You know, Dana's talking about the mentorship and that the messenger, the credible messenger. I like that term. From your point of view, I know you know Once a Cop is going to be out in May, and it really tells your story. And I'm gonna go back to you in a minute, Dana, because I want to see how students receive it. But first, Corey, I want to ask you how is telling your story helpful to our students, because you do have a story to tell, and you really were able to kind of change your trajectory, by doing what? How did you? What was that about? How did that come about? What did you see in yourself that you wanted better for yourself?
Well, I came from a family of 5 sisters and myself, and we grew up on welfare. So we was poor, and we wasn't dirt poor, but there was many nights we had to eat mayonnaise sandwiches and eat cereal with water. Right. So like my mom and my father left in the 3rd grade, so things really went downhill then. And as I got into my teenagers, like 13, I just gravitated to the streets because you're a product of your environment. I'm talking about being a teenager in the 80s. It was gangsters, pimps, drug dealers, cop killers. That's what I grew up around. Wow. And I just gravitated toward that. But I always knew that I wanted better for myself because I knew right from wrong. Even these kids, they out here doing this stuff, they know right from wrong.
Right.
I just didn't have the options at the time with a very young age to make a change, and I waited till I was about 18 and actually graduated from high school. So right after graduating from high school, 3 months later, I was in the United States military, and I left the streets never to return. And obviously, then I went into the police department 3.5 years later. It's funny you say, like, what could kids do? So I do a lot of motivational speaking. I have a corporation, Corey Pegues Enterprise, and it just so happens, Verdel, this morning, I did a speech out at ASA High School up in Harlem. Okay. It's one of the most disadvantaged areas out there. It's a school that's on the low end of the totem pole. So, the principal's calling me. I want you to come speak at my school. These kids are bad. I don't know what to do. But I can tell you, once I grabbed the mic and I went in there and spoke, these kids, you could hear a pin drop in the room. I had their attention because they could relate.
They could relate.
I started off like, yo, I'm here, Corey Pegues. I'm in the building. Y'all been waiting for me. What's going on? So you got to kind of relate to the kids. I could go in there with the suit and tie and talk like
Wait a minute. Did you have your baseball cap on?
No, I had a suit and tie.
Oh, you did. Okay.
I don't do that. Paid gigs. I dressed the part.
Oh, okay. All right.
But it was more of me just like knowing the vernacular of the kids, involving them in this whole speech that I did. I was talking about police and citizen encounters on the street and in the car and in the home, stop, question, and frisk, all of these things that help these kids. Right. And letting them ask me questions, I was answering. But they felt so comfortable that it was me.
Yeah, right. So it was well received. And that was going to be my question to you, Dana, as finding the individuals to actually speak to the students. Probably, I'm not sure, but I would think a lot of people who have turned their lives around would want to speak to our youth. And how do the students receive it?
Generally speaking, we're very selective. We need to be very mindful that we're working with minors, and we have to be careful as to who we place before them. But once that due diligence is done, and they're placed in that environment, the students, just as Corey said, they respond well. There's nothing like, if you've never had a grandfather or a father, there's nothing like having someone who would be grandfather-like come to you and say, listen, my experience is I spent 29 years behind bars for acts that if I could do it over again, I would do something different. Yeah. And my path kind of looked like yours. Yes, Corey's right. A pin, you could hear a pin drop. Right. And if you're using someone from a similar community, like they live in the same community, you know, we hear stories of them seeing them on the street, and the students will engage the adult. Hey, how are you, Mr. So-and-so? You know, I've got more questions for you. It's called having a support system and really trying to identify why the kid's acting this way. Why was that young lady on the cell phone? Why did she feel she didn't have to respect the authority of the officer in the room? Maybe she too is going through something. So when you talk about resources, outside of what law enforcement is doing, and lots of law enforcement, including Nassau County law enforcement, I'm well aware of, are trying to engage the youth in a very positive way. Exposing them to what it really means to be a police officer, why the police, you know, is needed, etc., and kind of create better relationships or a better understanding, which leads to better relationships. But it's not only in the hands or the responsibility of law enforcement. And it's certainly not only in the hands of the DA's office. School districts also have funding or need to ensure that some funding goes towards development of our youth beyond academics. You know, that young lady probably needed something other than just pure academics, or any young person in a school district.
We're kind of talking a little bit about the incident that happened in South Carolina when the police officer came and violently removed you know, the student.
And let me be clear, there was nothing that I saw from that clip that young lady did that warranted
that.
Absolutely not. There is, I mean, it could be your son or daughter where you say, you know, you have to get off the phone, and they decided not to. You're not going to drag them across a room, you know, in the manner that it was done. It was just appalling.
It was.
But there are kids that need support beyond academics. And what are the school districts doing about that beyond bringing law enforcement in and saying, okay, well, let's arrest our way out of the problem?
And, you know, and it's training not only with the police that may be policing our students, but it's training throughout. And it's those, like you said, it's those resources. So having individuals come in to speak to students, I think is vital.
And in real training, there are things like mindfulness training. Like, how do you ensure that your behavior as an adult or as a child mirrors how you would want to be treated in any environment, in any interaction that you're having, being clear about how you're interacting with the next person. And that's not an hour. That's not a workshop for a day. That's really incorporating that stuff in the fiber, in the fabric of what we're teaching our young people as we develop them into adulthood.
Corey, did you want to speak to that at all?
No, I think she touched on it. She touched on it.
So I was hearing a little bit about, or what I kind of interpreted as the importance of community policing. Like Dana was talking about Nassau County officers and how they are trying to reach out to the youth. In the New York City Police Department, a major, huge police department, what are some strategies or interventions that that they use to work with our youth?
Yeah, well, they're having a very, extensive outreach program. It's the biggest police department. They got like 35,000 cops. So they have a big community affairs division. Division. They have community affairs actually in every single borough, and then every single precinct they have community affairs officers. So there's a few thousand that's committed. Then they have youth officers also, some of it, inside of the school. So it's a very extensive outreach with the NYPD in terms of trying to bridge that gap between, the youth and the police. They actually have a camp in the summertime. They do it Fort Totten, in Brooklyn. They bring the kids there and teach them all kind of stuff. It's a very extensive program they have out there.
And what can, and I'll ask both of you this because we did mention schools and their responsibility. What do you think some other things that schools can do to try to help our youth, to try to do some of the things that you had mentioned, Dana? What do you, in addition to bringing someone like Corey Pegues in to talk to the students, what on a day-to-day basis, working with youth that may not have the best situation, what do you think are some things that can be done?
Well, one of the things that everybody should do, all the principals in the school district should pre-order my book, Once a Cop.
Okay.
Just pre-order that book and have all these kids read it, and they can see this, transformational story.
Right.
They also can stop calling the police.
Right.
They can stop calling the police. They can actually really try, like the ADA was saying, I heard her say earlier, like they have to deal with these situations. Only bring the police in when it's a crime.
Right. Right.
We're not. That's what we deal with. You have to be clear. Police job is to preserve peace and property. That's what we do. We don't intervene and try to fix situations where two kids had an argument. We're expecting that the school districts have people that be able to deal with those
Qualified
situations.
to do that. Right. Yeah. And it's the whole
outreach, doing programs. When I was a commanding officer of the 67 precinct, I had all these programs. I had essay writing contests on what would I do if I was the police commander. I had youth sports day. I had all of these things to involve the youth to let them know the police are not the enemy.
Right.
We're your friends.
Yeah. That has, I think, a lot to do with it. And it's because of the policing. It's not only the policing in the schools, but it's the policing in the neighborhoods where these students, where these children are, and how it, that communication just isn't there in some instances. Yeah. So it's very important.
I think that school districts should consider spending more money in incorporating or enhancing academics with other types of development classes and training, and it should be done consistently throughout the school year. I also think mentoring really needs to start from K all the way through 12. And you see a difference in children who are mentored. I think parents have a role that we have not talked about, maybe in another space, but parents have a role here, and we would be remiss in not recognizing that. As a parent, you have a role that you play. It is not just on the police, it's not on someone else, it's not just on the school district.
Right.
It takes a village.
It takes a village.
It takes a village to absolutely develop our kids in the way we want them developed. And it also takes a village to respond to things that are occurring to our children that should not be happening. It takes a village.
And that's the thing. I was going to get to the parent piece, but we only have a couple of minutes, and the time just goes by very, very fast. But parents being involved, and I often say, and I let parents know I'm in the field of education, the more you're there and out front and advocating for your child, the more individuals will respond. It's just that proximity. You're in there, you're active, you're engaged in your child's education. People will take notice and make changes as such.
In the same way, the legal system and law enforcement can be used to address behaviors that children or the youth are exhibiting.
Right.
It's the same way the legal system can be a tool to address injustices that we're seeing in this issue of the school to prison pipeline.
Right. Corey, I'm going to leave the last word with you. If you want individuals to reach out to you, how can they do that? You mentioned your book, Once a Cop. I know they can get it on Amazon.com, but if there's any other information you'd like to share?
Yes, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, C. Pegues, that's Pegues, and follow me on Twitter, same thing, C. Pegues, and Facebook, Corey Pegues.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Listen, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me with the lovely ADA in my county, out in Nassau County, and she's doing some great things out here. I know all about her. Thanks again.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to thank both of my guests, and thank you for watching Conversations with Verdel Jones.
Thank you, Verdel.
All righty.